And I did mention, if you haven't seen your email inbox recently, there is a very rough copy of the survey results. I don't get a real pretty version for printing, but it does give you all the data. And we'll take a brief look at that tonight too. So it's 6 o'clock and I think we will get started, but we'll give people a little chance to join us too by doing introductions. We have a new person joining us this evening, Mackenzie Pascal. So if you want to jump on and say hi, and then if you just want to take turns unmuting yourself and just saying hello, that would be great.
I'm Mackenzie Fasco. I have a daughter in 4th grade in elementary school, Josie. I work for Theta Care, so I feel I have some information or background that could be helpful to this committee.
Good to have you. Thank you.
I'm Jeff Bortle. I'm a teacher at the high school and I have 3 kids in the district.
I'm Brian Kobarubius. I'm the technology director.
I'm Jackie Cerno. Oh, Danny. I'm just kidding. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jackie. I'm Jackie Cerno. I'm the district reading specialist, and I also have 2 kids in the district. Now it's Danny's turn.
Thank you. I'm Danny Grower. I will be the elementary principal and special ed director for the upcoming school year.
I'm Sandra Ryerson. I have 2 grandchildren in the school district.
Hello, I'm Jed Wolt. I'm the Wolfpack County Health Officer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Wolfgram, principal of Little Wolf High School and Manawa Middle School. Woo.
Got a voice for radio there.
I'm Stephanie Risky, and I am a parent, and I have 3 children in the district.
I'm Jackie Greeno. I'm the CISA 6 school nurse coordinator, and I'm currently working in Winnebago County.
Hello, I'm Carmen O'Brien. I am the business manager.
Steve Getters, I'm the medical advisor.
I'm Jacob Elsner. I'm the terminal manager for Colbison Buses.
Stacy Clausen. I am a mom of 2 children, or 2 kids that go to the district.
Amy Bodart. I'm also a mom of 2 children in district.
I'm Mary Ack. I'm one of the summer school coordinators, and I teach at the high school.
Janine, I think I saw you hop on. Okay, Janine's having a little bit of microphone difficulty, but she is on, and she is our secondary school counselor. So thank you for joining us this evening. And We do have the agenda. I did again put the advisory nature of this committee and the list of tasks that are before us. I wanted to start by having you give me a little recap. Did you hear anything this past week from people that you talked to? Maybe you were out, maybe you saw some family members or friends over the holiday weekend. What are they saying about school reopening?
Most of the people I talked to, it just said they wanted to start. They want the school to reopen. There was also a few concerns about safety, like for the backpacks being brought into the classroom, if they were going to be checked for safety concerns that way, because in the past they couldn't take their backpacks because of safety. So they were wondering if that was going to be looked at. And also snow boots on the carpet, you know, like come winter, if they're keeping their boots at the elementary school, their boots or their snow pants or whatever in the classrooms on the new carpet, if there would be some sort of protection so that that wouldn't get ruined.
Those, the one thing, I'll start with the last one first. The new carpet squares are very durable and sturdy. So you kind of clean them with more of a scrubber machine than you do a carpet shampooer. So I think they're going to hold up well because that same carpet is throughout the whole building, including in the houses where the lockers are. But we could look into putting down some mats. I know at the high school in the entryways, like our front vestibule has that walk-off carpeting. And that does a nice job of scraping off and collecting the water, but we'll definitely take a look into that because tile can get slippery when it's wet too. I wanted to ask you about the backpack safety in the classroom. Are you talking about kids bringing in dangerous items like weapons or drugs and alcohol? Is that the nature of the safety?
Yes. They had just mentioned about, you know, past safety things that now are being overlooked because of this. So I'm assuming, I guess I didn't ask that specifically if it was drugs or weapons, but I'm assuming both.
Okay, that's a good consideration. I made note of that to talk about how we're going to make sure that it's filled with the school supplies they need, which is the intention.
I have heard a few concerns regarding the elementary school kids coming back instead of the high school. And mostly revolving around high school kids are going to be hanging out and being exposed to each other anyways. And then how will we keep elementary kids in the same room, same building for 8 hours and not start having behavioral kind of issues is the biggest two things I've heard. And then a lot of, we really want school to be open, but we want it to be open that is conducive to our children learning and not being, you know, stuck in a room and having to worry then about behavioral is the two biggest things I've heard.
Excellent points. I think it ties in with something that was raised last week about making sure there's enough physical movement in the day that you can do in your space or by going outside to burn off that natural energy that we know all kids have, all people have. Good one.
I think I heard more concerns about the busing situation. My grandkids generally get on the bus between 6:30 and 6:40 in the morning. And knowing that this is a rather large bus route around the Ogdensburg area, you know, the concerns as far as the time and if you're making several treks with the bus, they're already getting up early where there's, you know, then they're already going to be sitting for an extended period of time. How much longer are we going to have them, you know, hanging out before or after school, and everything for that type of activity, because, you know, they're generally one of the first ones on and one of the last ones off. So that's a concern.
I do think we'll talk a bit about that tonight, and Jacob can speak to it when we get to the slideshow a little bit, to whether or not we're anticipating a lot of extended time. It didn't sound like it, but definitely something to note. Anybody else hearing any rumblings? Anything from the staff?
I had a building leadership team meeting last week, which was about, I think I had like 6 or 7 teachers that were part of that. And I went through some of what we talked about in this meeting, in this group on Monday, and then some plans. And we just talked through some ideas. Their biggest thing is they want to be back with kids. Everyone on that team was very happy to hear that we were talking about bringing students back. They had a few good ideas of, like, one thing that came out of it was, since we are planning not to allow students to use the drinking fountains, that we only have one water bottle filler, which is kind of away from the classrooms. So we talked about what could we do? Could we get more water bottle fillers? So that was something that I hadn't even really thought of yet. So I've got some feelers out. We talked to PTO. I talked to a plumber this weekend that I've been ordered to take pictures and send them so that he can take a look at what we have. But those were some of the big things. We talked a lot about getting kids outside, getting kids to play. And then one of the big concerns, we have two of the big concerns that as a team we needed to work on. And one is, how do we create a school community when we can't be together? Because one of the big things that we did was, in the past, the assemblies, getting kids excited and really getting all the same messages, not being able to get them in the same room. I think we all know with these virtual meetings that it's just not the same when you're not in the same room. And then the other thing was, the thing that we're asking them to implement is going to add time to the day. And this has nothing to do with academics. So how do we balance all of these little things that are going to add up? Washing hands more often, taking the different recess schedules and lunch in the classrooms. How are we going to balance all that and be able to get in the academics and be sure that students are emotionally and socially where they need to be? So those are just some, we didn't have any answers necessarily, but we had some really awesome discussion about, and the bottom line is teachers are really excited to see kids again.
I would echo the same type of sentiments with also a flip side of the coin. I know all my staff are salivating to get back to see kids. They are concerned about, especially at the middle school level, cohorts and movement, that discipline-wise, that it's going to be a challenge to keep them engaged when most of the day they're going to be somewhat cloistered. So that was one concern. Another concern that I heard since our last meeting was after the 4th of July and seeing some of the things that are coming on the news, and they're concerned about the numbers exploding and doing a 180 reversal as far as the schools potentially opening. They don't know what it's going to look like, but they're concerned with the high level of where Waupaca County seems to start. It's continuing to trend in an upward fashion. So they feel as though, all right, we're going to go, and then it's going to be a short amount of time before we're right back virtual again. So those were a couple concerns that I heard as well.
The county superintendent met with Jed this morning, and we shared that concern that we're not moving in the right direction, or at least plateauing. So we're hoping that we can be part of the education for the community to give some tips. the best thing to do would be able to flatten the curve to enable us to be able to return to school successfully. So maybe asking our community to help us do that. If you want the kids all back in school, we're going to need a little bit of help. And I'm sorry, Tracy, you just started to say something.
That's okay. No, yours was more important. I'm sure this will come out when we get the teacher survey, but as much as, yes, we do definitely want to see the kids and, get everything back to normal. So far, what I've heard in our plan and watching TV and numbers, and this might just be me personally, but I'm pretty worried because I have, I check off 4 at-risk or high-risk pre-existing conditions. So me coming back for 9 hours a day in a building, indoors, whatever, I don't know that it scares me as of right now. So I want to see my kids, but I also want to be safe. And I've talked to my doctor a few times and, she says, try not to be indoors around people. So I'm not sure what that looks like then.
Well, we know that with all this stuff going on, we're going to have children that will have to be taught from home, whether they're sick, in which case they might not be able to study too much, but you're going to have many that are self-quarantining, that are otherwise feeling healthy, that just have to stay home for a couple weeks. And even if they don't have health conditions, maybe they have parents with significant health conditions where they can't go to school or be around other kids because their parent has had a heart transplant or is severe immunosuppressed issues. So we will be thrilled to have some people that really pioneer and spearhead being the innovators of teaching remotely. And you might be one of that group.
Thank you.
If I can add to that a little bit, Tracy, like one thing we're looking into is technology solutions to things like that, which would mean not ideally, obviously, because obviously we want people all together, but something along the lines of a camera in the room, a mic in the room, and then the kids can see you from wherever you are. Obviously, we don't have any idea what that looks like, in the trenches yet, but that is something that has been on a lot of people's minds. Like, what does this look like if what happens if teachers get sick, right? How do we continue running a school if a certain limit of teachers are sick? That's obviously something that we've been thinking about.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you. And just thanks for listening to that comment. It might be pretty singular, but you had asked about concerns, so.
I don't think you're alone. I think there are a number of people, and in fact, over the weekend, I had a parent contact me about enrolling because she has a child that it's not safe to come to school. And so both the child and the sibling will stay home, and they were looking for a way to make learning work from home, and glad to hear that we had some options available for them. So I think it works both directions. And I apologize, I did not get the survey done, the staff survey done last week, because as most of you know by now, I spent most of the week in the hospital with my mom. So, and I thought I was going to have a little time to work, and actually that didn't work out for me. So I actually didn't get as much done as I had hoped to do. So I'm going to have to really pedal to the metal this week. Other things anyone heard out there? Please do keep asking, share with people, talk with them, find out what they're thinking. I'm hoping that the survey results are representative of the feelings of the community, and based on what I'm hearing from other communities, I think they are, but there could be people out there with unique issues that we haven't heard, and we would like them to share that so we can plan for it and make sure we have something for everyone. based on our discussions last week, we did want to have just a little bit of time to talk with food service and just brainstorm a little bit about what that's going to look like at a high level. So Carmen and Brenda, I know, have been doing some research on that. So I'm going to turn it over to whomever wants to share their screen, Carmen or Brenda, and talk us through what you're thinking. Carmen, are you out there? Did we lose you?
I'm here. I'm having troubles.
Okay.
Trying to find, oh, well, whatever. So I was, as far as food service is concerned, we are going to be delivering to the classrooms throughout the district. And so that will be a given. We are looking at, Danny has made a schedule for the elementary school where food times are going to be staggered. So we should have enough time to get those delivered. We're looking at, we don't have all the details yet of exactly how that's going to look or work, but essentially we'll take in the every first hour teacher or every morning teacher will have to take food service, will have to take a lunch count, and they will have to put that into the office, and we'll make the lunches and we'll deliver them for fourth hour. Or during fourth hour at the high school, or during the lunch hour, excuse me. At the high school, around about fourth or fifth hour, we're going to be doing the deliveries that way. Middle school will have their own time. So it's essentially, we've got it worked out so that we can deliver meals to classrooms. I don't know what else to say about that.
So in our district, we've, a lot of people don't know the language, but there are two different programs, offer or serve. And we've always had the offer where kids have some choices. And I think you had talked about, you have a way to do that. So kids can still have the choices that they had in the past.
Right. Sorry, I wish Brenda was on. So
she's having some speaker difficulties. She typed in.
Okay, so with the food service, the students, they can, there are some main parts of their lunch that are the components that they have to take. And so those will be on every hot lunch tray. There are some parts that they get to choose then. So we will have those individually wrapped, and the students will be able to choose from the other items. So let's say we have, they could have either a bag of veggies, an apple, or a banana. And so of those, they could take 2 of those. So then they could choose those that they would get to include as part of their meal. So we'll still have some opportunities for that, to do that, so that students have a choice in what they're eating.
And so we were thinking, and that's what Brenda was saying in the chat, that out of the 5 components, 3 required or included, and then 2 extra to choose. And the adults would have gloves on and would be handing that out. So we would not have students touching food items. So there'd be care taken in how they're distributed.
As far as a la carte, we were hoping to still be able to offer a la carte at the high school for our middle school and high school students. For that, we would hope that we could still have kids come into the cafeteria. It'd be kind of like when we have the When you go to a restaurant or whatever, we would have X's on the floor where they would stay 6 feet apart, but they would be able to come in and get a snack or get their breakfast. Potentially, well, probably not breakfast, but get their a la carte items and then be on their way during passing time.
I guess that was what I was hearing from the students, like concern about, especially at the middle and high school, they love their a la carte and that freedom to be able to have access to food if they need it, and how that was going to work. And I guess also, now that you mentioned breakfast, how is that going to work? Because I know a lot of our students eat breakfast at school.
We had talked about the potential of taking a breakfast count the day before, having students fill out a Google sheet, something like that. Or potentially we could have grab and go bags of breakfast where they would, you know, come in off the bus, grab a bag and take it to their first hour class. The problem with, you know, having those preset things is that it doesn't leave for, I mean, if we're going to have, I think Brenda called them shelf stable items, you know, that are in a bag that don't need to be refrigerated. It does, you know, get a little tiring. The menu isn't as varied. So we're still going to be working through, you know, what kind of things that we can offer and what's going to work best. I think some of it is going to be try some things and see how that goes. What we really don't want to happen is to have kids congregating somewhere. So we want to keep them moving. So you grab something and you're moving along and everybody's staying apart as they get their food. So we're still working through a couple of those ideas yet.
I was thinking the last place I went where there were marks on the floor and you had to stay your 6 feet apart while you're waiting in line. So everybody takes their turn stepping up and so forth.
Is staffing adequate? Because it sounds like this may take maybe a little bit more time on the front end with like packaging and all of that and delivery, or is that still being kind of worked out?
That is definitely still being worked out. We're looking at potentially reassigning some people to some places. Currently, we have a position open, so we are collecting applications for that at this time as well. So if we were to need more staff, we currently have a pretty decent sized candidate pool.
Any other questions at a high level on food service? There was a question about whether or not we'd want volunteers, and because we're limiting staff, we probably would not have volunteers unless it was literally the same volunteer every day of the week, you know, and kind of a permanent volunteer. Not so much like the step volunteers where you might see a different fresh face or two every day of the week, and more on some days than others. And plus there are high-risk groups, so we probably would not be using folks like that. Anything else on food service?
I don't know the legalities and sorry, Brenda, but if we're using like some of the shelf stable items, are there some things that maybe I don't know, I'm thinking about like our student groups or you know, anything that can be pre-packed ahead of time. And I know, like I said, with health and safety and gloves and all of that, but I'm thinking it's an option to maybe make students feel more that they're a part of their own solution kind of thing.
I guess, Janine, I don't understand what you're implying.
Well, if the student council packed food bags for breakfast.
Oh,
Yep, that's what I was implying, like, student
Okay,
council
sorry.
or different student groups or whatever could help with any of that shelf stable stuff that could be packed ahead of time, or if we had like a Friday packing time or anything like that. Just to, like I said, just to maybe get some more of the students involved in being their own kind of solution to this issue.
We just have to look at what the food rules are. The DPI has very strict rules for food service. So we just have to look into that, which Carmen and Brenda have access to the experts down at the DPI who could probably answer questions like that, help us out. Well, thank you, Carmen and Brenda. And Brenda, I'm sorry your microphone isn't working, but we're glad you're on with us.
Carmen was sorry too. She has more information than I do. I'm sorry.
Well, maybe we'll see if we can get you a different computer for next week so you can join us verbally.
There we go.
All right, so Brenda welcomes the help. In terms of the school perception survey that closed last week, and again, the view that I can share looks much more attractive, but it doesn't print that way, unfortunately. So you do have the basic data, though. All the data is the same. You just don't get the nice bar graphs and attractive colors and visuals that I'm able to see. But we did get pretty good representation across the district. For us to get 220 surveys back from roughly 645 possible families, or roughly that number, that's a good turnaround rate for us to get a third of them responding. And when we look at it, good representation across all the grade levels. So we heard from at least a few people in every grade level. Overall, people felt learning in the spring was okay. We did have a few people in the poor category where we'll be looking into the challenges particularly that they experienced. The principals will be looking at those because in the survey, it's name specific and family. So they'll be able to explore the issues that certain families encountered. And then we can look to see if that's about technology, if it's about learning style, different sorts of things, and we'll be able to better address those. So I have those run off and scanned for the principals, and those should go out tomorrow. But generally speaking, based on what I hear from other districts, we did fairly well. To have that many people in the good and great category, fairly strong representation. So we'll do even better now that we've had an opportunity to learn more, and we'll talk with our staff too about what kind of PD would they like to feel more confident getting ready for the fall. That will be critical. Again, we asked the next question about who was home this spring and how did that work. And we know that many of our families had definite challenges with childcare and did return to work or continued to work throughout the closure because they were in that essential workers category. So we are going to have to work out some support systems to deal with that. I think the fact that we're looking at bringing all the kids back, I think we'll address a goodly share of that. But again, we had some very family-specific feedback we can address as well. Bryant, maybe you want to chime in. A number of the parents didn't feel as confident in supporting their kids with homework that was online. And nowadays, even whether we're talking snow days or just homework in general, it's more likely to come home in a technological form than it is traditional paper and pencil in many instances. So what have you got cooking to help parents?
So, and I haven't seen a lot of these numbers, so I don't know what the split is between the elementary school and the high school. I would suspect from the elementary school, they probably had a lot less comfort level with the elementary school students, but there are things we can do to provide more outreach to families to help them be more comfortable with it. Specifically, any of the systems we have, like Google Classroom, we can do things to help them feel more comfortable supporting their kids with that. Also, we kind of rely on the students to support their own Chromebooks. We can do things like make resources available so parents can feel more comfortable helping with the devices. I think a lot of people might have felt dead in the water once they hit a certain point where they didn't know how to support the devices. I did get a lot of support calls from families about technology issues, like getting their Chromebooks on networks and that kind of a thing. But a lot of that was like through teachers. So like a parent would contact a teacher and a teacher would contact me. I think we can streamline that and maybe have a support channel. So if we were to be shut down again, we could have kind of like a support number or a support, some sort of support channel so parents can directly get help instead of having to go through teachers and teachers go through me and then kind of backtrack. I think if we do that, we can have a better experience for people. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. And of course, I'm open to suggestions. So if anybody here has ideas, throw them out there, because we're learning a lot of this as we go. So whatever you got, I'm happy to hear.
Just a quick comment on that. I think I understand we threw it all together real quick and everything, but there wasn't necessarily a standard format using the Google Classroom. What programs are being used? Are assignments always in Google Classroom, or am I sending things out in an email? So there was some confusion, and this, it wasn't all one way one day and all another way the next day. So if we were missing things, it didn't always show up in a standard type format. That everything's in Google Classroom, and then we link those other programs through there, because there were some emails assignments that were missed, which there was really no notation within the Google Classroom that there was an email assignment, and that type of thing, and stuff. So if we could work on maybe standardizing a little bit more, here's our base format and we're all going to use it, and then the additional things and stuff are maybe a class specific, activity specific situation, so that it's a little bit easier for us that are jumping in to help if we need to be homeschooling or helping at home, that we have some idea of what the basics are, and then go to look for those extras, just from what I saw.
That makes a lot of sense. Not just for if we're learning, if the school's shut down, that makes a lot of sense. It also makes sense as the normal, right? So having kind of some set expectations for how we're using technology, so that if you have parents, or if you have students at middle school and high school, that you're able to support them if things are similar. So setting some expectations. There's a lot of conversations to be had between the administrators and the teachers about what expectations we have for how they use technology. And I can't really go into specifics about that because we still have to have those conversations. And that's something that we're kind of getting set up over the summer. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. It would make a lot of sense where if there's an assignment that it's kind of issued the same way. But that's something we want to have conversations with the teachers about to make sure we're all on the same page.
And appreciation there for the daily updates. So those teachers that did daily updates, that was a helpful tool just for Dan and Danny to know parents like that. Also on the survey was the return to school, and we're right in there with pretty much the whole state in terms of our percentage. So the no and unsure group is about 12.9%. And on average, what I'm hearing from the other superintendents across the state is it ranges from 10% to 15% that are either unsure or are not returning in person, but are looking for other alternatives and looking to their district to provide other alternatives. So we're right in there with everybody else on that. In terms of technology access, most people felt they had the technology they needed. I did see a few comments from parents wanting to make sure that it's their understanding that if we need devices to learn from their children's perspective, then the devices should be provided by the school. And I think today in many regards, we don't buy as many textbooks as we used to. We buy technology and we load the devices with, the materials, the tailored reading materials that are suitable for each of the learners. And we're doing more of those sorts of things. So I think there is that shift in spending and shift in patterns, although we're in the era or the generation that's making the shift. So for those of us like me that didn't grow up with computers, it might be a harder shift to learn to do all our reading on a device rather than the comfort of, I still love touching the book, turning the pages the traditional way. But again, we're seeing pretty traditional results here across the board. I saw numerous comments about doing what we can to expand rural broadband. I don't know if any of you are connected politically or if you're active that way, but I know state legislators have talked about putting forth a bill to put money toward expanding rural broadband, which would greatly benefit our community. So if you do have connections there or have time to jot a letter to a legislator, this might be the perfect time to share how important that could be for some of our families. And I apologize if I seem distracted and appear to be looking out the window where the sky is getting more and more black by the minute. So hopefully we won't have a thunderstorm and lose each other here.
Can I add one thing about the devices, Melanie? Dr. Hopper?
You sure can.
Okay, so I don't remember if I mentioned this last week, but so the school district has one-to-one devices for grades 6 through 12. And then one major thing we realized with the schools closing down is that we have a major gap in access to technology for the, I would say, the younger kids. So that is something we are looking to address. It's very difficult financially to go from like 0 to 100 with a one-to-one program. So we are looking to get more devices in the hands of the younger kids, particularly like the kindergartners through the second graders, as making that part of the new normal for the one-to-one program. But that does take a couple years. So our plan is to get more devices available. And then if the schools do close down, we want to try to understand from our families who does not have enough technology, and then put Chromebooks and Chrome tablets, which look kind of like iPads, but they're different, into the hands of those families specifically. So we put technology where it's needed as opposed to trying to put technology everywhere. And that's only because we can't get one-to-one from pre-K through 5 in 1 year. It's something we have to phase in. So that's just, I just want to add that to, who has devices. It's something we're trying to add more in the district. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to do it all at once.
I also have a question about the devices. I know my 7th grader going into 8th grade, she would always complain her Chromebook did not work right. It wasn't working. It wasn't working. How are we going to help those students that need, these kids are going to have these Chromebooks all summer and hopefully they take care of them. But how are we going to fix them come the start of the school year? Because I am worried it's going to cost the district a lot of money because these Chromebooks are going to be in horrible condition.
Yeah, and that's why I have gray hair, Stephanie. So typically what my goal is I spend the summer, I take in all the devices in the spring, and then I spend the summer fixing them, repairing them, making sure that day one, like 99.5% of the kids have a working device, they're able to log in, they're ready to go. That's not going to happen this year. So this year, kids are going to bring them in. A certain percentage of them are not going to be working, and it's going to be a big sprint in the first couple of weeks of the school year to get everybody a working device. So we'll have some loaner devices, but then we're going to get them fully operational, hopefully within the first 2 weeks.
Why did we not have them turn them in? I guess I know it probably doesn't have much to do with this, but I guess I don't understand why we didn't have them turn them in over the summer.
A couple things. One, we didn't know what summer school was going to look like. So if we were going to be able to have people in the buildings at all. So we wanted to make sure they had their devices in case that was happening. Same with remediation. So if people were getting incomplete, we want to make sure they had their devices so they can try to get caught up. Again, we don't know what's going to happen in the fall. So if we're not able, if there's a huge massive spike, we were trying to, look through a crystal ball to figure out what the fall looks like. We wanted to give ourselves the options, is what it comes down to. Believe me, I am a huge proponent for wanting to bring them in so they can be ready to go first day. It's just we wanted to give ourselves the flexibility, and that's why we left them with the students.
Excellent question. And then
Would it all help if, I don't know, and just trying to troubleshoot that as we prepare, is there any type of message we might be able to send out to families to have them test them several weeks ahead of time? So that way it can be an on-ramp to maybe, I don't know, it's another thing to drop them off. I don't know, just trying to think out of the box as ways to get them in your hands so you are not inundated completely within the first 2 weeks, if we can have a gradual on-ramp.
I think that's a great idea. It would also be beneficial to know rounds about how many aren't working, so that if we know that there's X number that are broken, then we can get X plus 10% loaners ready. So yeah, that actually would be beneficial. That's something worth talking about. There's a lot of conversations with the 4th of July. A lot of us weren't working the last few days. So there's still a lot of conversations that we still need to have that we didn't have since our last meeting. But that's obviously, I think that'd be a great idea. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And those children coming in for summer school, we could ask them to bring them, and so we could make sure that we could test them, make exchanges, do repairs, that sort of thing. That might be an opportunity as well.
Are you going to have a registration and picture day?
There will be a school registration day. We're still working out with Jed some of the final details, but Danny, would you want to just give a high-level overview of what you're planning?
I'm just thinking because maybe they could bring them in then if they're broken, and then to work on them before school starts.
That's another very good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, that could be a possibility. So like just overall, we will be having the picture day and registration. We are planning on having staff members out. If it's nice out, we're all praying for nice weather. Staff members outside that would be greeting people, making sure that everything is filled out. We'll be social distancing outside when we need to. They will be talking to everyone inside. So we know that there are specific times that there's more people. So we are working out a system with if we're full inside, that we'd be able to text people as they're waiting so they could wait in their cars if they want, if it's hot or if the weather, if it's raining. We will social distance inside. We'll have an express lane for people who just need to drop off paperwork and then go in and get their pictures taken. Yeah, we're still working out the final details, but we'll have the elementary, middle, and high school registration staff there. We're planning to have food service staff, guidance especially for the high school, because we know that schedule changes happen. and the pictures. So I don't know if you guys have any other questions about it, but we've thought about it quite a bit.
Are we doing any type of just online registration so that, you know, kids that might happen to not be available during that time can just fill out their stuff and not be late?
Yeah,
that would help for.
And you can send, there are some forms, I think 3 or 4 forms that we need the paper copies. So those could be mailed back in. All the stuff could be mailed back in. You could also do it online, and then there will be picture day during the school year in September, I think. I don't have the date on the tip of my tongue right now, but there will also be the retake day during the school year. So if people don't come in and get their pictures taken, they can be taken at that time.
And to add to that, Danny, so the online registration is for returning students. The system does not handle online registration for new students. So basically, it's just going in and updating all of your contact information and answering a few questions. Unfortunately, there is a lot of paperwork that isn't handled within Skyward in that way. So there is still a lot of paperwork that needs to be done manually.
Thank you. Great questions. And then finally, there was the transportation question. And again, not much has changed since we last looked at it last week, but it does look like we see more people willing to transport their own children or preferring to transport their own children before and after school, or they have a relative, or there are young drivers that can bring siblings, which should lighten the load a little bit with busing. Now, this is just, again, a third of our population, just a sampling, but it does appear that more than the usual number are choosing to find their own means of getting to school. So with that, I put Bryant next on the list. Was there more you wanted to share about your plans for technology? And then we'll close out the evening with the slideshow.
Yeah, so like I said a little earlier, there's still a lot of conversations to be had. One thing that's kind of cropped up since that I didn't mention last time was what is it going to look like in the classroom, particularly with students that are, so if we have a classroom that has 25 kids, but 10 of them are at home, what does that look like for the teacher experience? So there's going to have to be a lot of conversations about that. So if we're having this hybrid model where we have some kids in our classroom, but we also at the same time have to educate kids that are at home, that's something that is definitely new. And there's some technology solutions to help that, but obviously teachers need to be part of that conversation. So there's going to be a lot of that coming up here in a few weeks. Just trying to wrap our heads around what does this look like as a new normal if we have some kids at home and some kids that are in the classroom.
Any other tech-related questions? If not, we'll close out the evening then with a high-level look at a draft of the reopening plan in a slideshow format that I was thinking might be helpful for you to use in talking points with other people, something we can send out to all of our families through Skylert. It can be on our district website. So kind of a way for people to get a feel for what we've been talking about, what we're thinking about. Behind just about every slide is probably 30 to 50 pages of details that other people are working on to implement the plans, but this at least would give the public a feel for the ideas. And now I am not as familiar with Google Slides, so this could be a little bit interesting. So we talked a little bit about some of the high-level topics that we need to think about. Here is the newest information. Staying consistent with the county, we're looking at 3 levels of risk to describe how we might handle school in general. So right now, we would be considered in Wapaka County in the orange or center column of the slide. And that would be all the kids are in school, but we're using modified scheduling. We're implementing limited numbers and movement. You hear that by having the cohorts of classes staying together. Increased building level safety protocols in place. We're going to have additional hand washing stations, the water bottle fillers, the distancing, all of those sorts of things we've all been talking about. And then really monitoring how we do transportation, which you'll see in a slide coming up. So if things took a dramatic turn for the worse, and Jed advised us that it wasn't safe to be in school, then we'd move to the right, the school closure, and that would be the total online learning, the better version of that than what you experienced last spring that we're all working on. And if you go to the left, low risk is returning more to the normal that you're accustomed to seeing. If this were fall 2019, what would it look like? So relaxing a lot of things, much more fluid movement through the building. We'd still want to maintain some of the good hygiene practices that I think we're going to see established, but I think things would relax a bit more. So across the county, this 3-tiered approach is kind of what we're thinking about. This is the first time you're seeing it, or yesterday if you had a chance to look at any of this earlier. Thoughts or reactions to the 3 levels of risk?
I have a question on, looking at risk per se. Are we talking about just that there's numbers, or are we talking about the severity of the numbers? Because, as we're talking about testing numbers, we see the numbers, we don't necessarily always see the severity of those numbers, because based on some of the recent numbers I've seen, the overall hospital bed numbers and ICU numbers are coming down dramatically and continue to come down. Deaths have come down and everything. And if we were to look at those numbers and we were to take that 90% of the overall county population is not in a nursing home, and everything in nursing home being what I would consider, its own unique subset. If we were to pull those, are those numbers included in the risk, or are we pulling those numbers out to really give a full understanding of that 99% and everything? So there's not a special cause, we're looking at common cause.
And I think I'll let Jed speak to, we talked a little bit about it last week, but I think she's talking about the statewide formula and how they determine what category to put the county in.
Right. So the statewide formula doesn't pull anything out. It's total numbers, and they use a burden factor and a trajectory factor to put those 2 pieces together to determine if you're low, high, or medium risk. And I'll say this, that's definitely a metric that we're going to look and use. I think it's put together pretty well. I don't know if it'll be the only consideration when we're talking about, especially like school closure, where we're looking at a certain point in time. We're going to use what we have for case numbers, what we're seeing trending locally. We're going to use that model that the state has put together. But you mentioned too some other things. You mentioned hospitalizations, deaths, those type of metrics. We're also going to have to put in consideration. We do meet. Public health does meet weekly with the local hospitals, and we get information on what they're seeing as far as trends and numbers, as far as inpatients and ICUs. And that information is also available regionally through the Wisconsin Hospitals Association. So there's those pieces that are in there. Outbreaks might factor into some things. Whether school or business or some other factor for outbreaks that will kind of go into decisions. So I think it's still going to be a combination of things, but a good one to start with is that the new metric that the state put together, the risk factors.
I have a question along those lines a little bit. I know in March when we closed, it was a statewide closure, every school in the state. So when we're looking towards the fall, are we looking at more of like it would be more countywide or statewide, or would it be on each specific district to make that decision on their own?
So I don't know if we'll see a statewide type of order. I think, with the Supreme Court ruling that may have changed some things on how the state is able to operate. Although I will say that was the one thing that did stick was the completion of the school closure. So I think that it's really though the state and everybody else is pretty much looking locally. It's either potentially a county-wide type of decision, depending on, again, a lot of different variables there. There's potential. It may just be a school district that is going through a particular, difficult time with cases that we may have to close one school. I guess it's kind of hard to just put it out there as, we're going to do the whole county at once, or we're going to do a school district at a time. But it's good either way. It's going to be locally. It's either going to be a county-wide closure, or it may be school, depending on circumstances around what's going on at that particular time. Does that kind of answer your question?
I guess, if I go on that, as far as then it's going to be a county situation, then you're saying we're looking at state numbers to do our risk factors and everything. Are we the overall state, or is this just state numbers out for Waupaca County? Because, we're kind of talking on two different things. If we're taking the risk and everything, and we're saying it's only going to be that the county would close, what are those numbers? How are we calculating those numbers?
So those are all the state breaks it down by county. So
okay.
the risk activity is broken down by county.
Okay.
The state also does do a risk activities for a statewide level as well. But as Melanie's brought up here, they'll do a case indicators by county. And then you can also do it regionally as well from there. And we're in the Fox Valley region.
I wanted to show you. So if there is a live link in your agenda, and that this would be the Wisconsin dashboard is the one that it's called under your resources. And then if you find our county and hover on it and click, then it will actually bring up specifically the Waupaca County information and how they make the decision. So if so our burden
and
was,
there they break down.
So we were in,
yep, go ahead, Melanie.
We were moderately high in burden and no significant change in trajectory, which put us in high. Am I recalling that correctly for our county?
Yep, so our burden, yep, exactly. Our burden was considered moderately high. We didn't have a significant change in trajectory, so that puts us in the high category. And that's in that bottom graph. If we were still moderately high, but we were trending down, we would drop down to the medium. And the website does break down a little bit more what it means for burden and trajectory as well.
Yeah, they actually.
I'll just add, and I'll add this too. I shared some updates from just over the weekend. We didn't have a very good weekend. We had more cases over the weekend at a rate that was a 3-day rate that we haven't had to this point. So we had 17 cases, new cases over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that's our largest 3-day total in a while. And our 7-day trend average for new cases per day went up to about 4.5, where the 2 to 3 weeks previous we were around 2.5. So, and you're seeing it kind of consistent statewide and nationally. That's kind of the trend of how things are going. We'll see what impact the fourth has too.
But I guess we have the numbers of positive tests, but I guess I'm trying to understand the severity of those cases and everything. Does we see more case numbers, but I don't see the trend correlating with the severity for a case and everything. Are these cases where people are asymptomatic? And everything. I'm trying to understand, what triggers, that severity correlation.
So I think, like I said, I think we'll also be paying attention to what our local hospitals are telling us and what information we're getting from the hospital association as far as trends on that level as well. I think what might, give us information that we have to consider like a school closure is how many staff do we have out at a certain time? How many students do we have out at a certain time? Is that something that's going to trigger, okay, we don't even have the amount of staff that we need to conduct in school activities right now. So those factors are going to also impact any decisions that we'll have to make.
So there are 2 authorities that can close school districts. That's the health department at the state or the local level. And the most local level we have in our community is the county. We don't have a city or municipal health department. Or the district administrator, which it gives me heart palpitations to even say that out loud. But that's how I can close school on a snow day or an inclement weather day. And, so I have that authority, which is an awesome burden that I really, it's why we need help and why we all need to get on the same page with this, because I don't want to be out there alone making that decision. And I won't be doing it alone. It'll be a team of experts assisting with that, but it is very closely watching the trends that are happening. And one of the things that we're hearing is that the transmission rate among children, the early research doesn't show as much transmission, but if they are carrying it home to other family members, we could have challenges with regard to that. And I am also concerned about staff, that we may get ourselves into a position, even in a typical year with colds and flu, we have had staff shortages where we are short subs and more than one teacher is doing double duty. We've had this over the past couple of winters that I've been here. So I am just concerned if we don't have enough staff to safely have kids in school, that could be another factor that we'd have to consider. Our subpool is quite small, and generally speaking, the largest percent of them are retired individuals. So again, in that high-risk category. We haven't talked to subs yet to find out how many are planning to return this fall. That's another survey that we plan to do just to find out. Some of them may wish to hold their name back from subbing until they feel comfortable and safe. All good questions, but it is county specific. And the question was, do we have to follow the guidelines? No, but county-wide, everyone's kind of in consensus. And then it goes out to CISA 6, the 42 districts in our CISA, our regional. They're looking at fairly consistent. And then I talked to the statewide group, and they're fairly consistent. We may be a little more liberal than some, and some are looking at much more conservative approaches than what we're doing. But I think we have to balance that with the health advice. Why wouldn't we take the precautions if we can, if it's feasible for us to do? And you can argue with me if you want, that's just fine. This is a good place to have that conversation, because I suspect, as we spoke last week, that there will be some people that are not going to care for some of the approaches that we're taking that we think are wise and safe, and just trying to be, if you're putting me in charge of taking care of your child, I'm going to take that very seriously. I'm not going to take any risks with your children. I wouldn't take risks with my own. So that's an all.
I guess I have a.
Go ahead.
The question when I say is the state, where did these levels of risk come? Did we create these levels of risk? Did the county create the levels of risk? Who created this chart? I guess because I mean we can argue numbers, but it doesn't matter if they're telling us this is the chart we need to follow, then this is the chart we need to follow. But I didn't know if we came up with it or if they came up with it.
This is a combination of Stevens Point, Wapaka, CISA 6, CISA 8, and New London. And so I begged, borrowed, and stole ideas from other people. So everybody's fairly consistent, and it pretty much shakes out at a high level looking like this. So in low risk and moderate and high risk, all the kids come to school. The only time kids would stop coming to school is if we had to close the school. Which also seems to be in line with the survey, what parents want us to do. But it is homegrown in terms of how we interpret it. So if you like different colors, if you like different words, if you think the descriptions are not clear or easy to understand, those are all things that we can change to make it work for our community. Not written in stone. It scares me when you all get so quiet. I work in a school. It's never quiet. So then to continue on, we'll look at a few more slides and see what you think. We use key performance indicators. So those are the goals, how we measure our success as a school district. We have 4 big buckets, and that's what you see in the little pie chart. And so as we go into the next few slides, that's how I broke out the assumptions. Janine was saying, could we look at the assumptions so we can reflect on those, have discussions with others? So I grouped them into these 4 buckets. A lot of them ended up in the operation efficiencies, in just the things we do with the physical spaces. So I'll let you scan that list, but again, nothing on that list that we didn't talk about last week when we got together. Then we talked a little bit earlier about food service. I didn't fill in as much in the high school section when I was creating this. I didn't have as much information as what Carmen and Brenda shared today, but we can flesh this out a little bit more tomorrow. But we will be able to continue with the offer versus serve and pre-plated meals. In terms of transportation, I know Jacob is on this evening, but at a high level, disinfecting between the routes, passengers seated back to front, and staggered seating. Passengers from the same household are sitting together, unless they squabble, in which case you'll separate them. Optional for city passengers may want to consider walking or biking. We do have a couple of in-town stops. And some of those folks might just find it easier to walk or bike or safer than using the bus. Then when we get to school, I'm envisioning we empty one bus, everybody clears the vestibule, gets moved on to their next place, into their classroom, and as soon as the vestibule is clear, we'll bring in the next load. And we usually have ample time because our buses do arrive early and on a normal morning, they're unloaded well before the start time of the day. And then just making parents aware that given the size of the routes, we can't guarantee physical distancing 100% of the time.
I guess one question on here is, most of the buses are carrying both elementary and junior high and high school students and everything, and I know the thought process was to, as they get on, everybody go to the back and everything else. But as they're leaving, not everybody's getting off at the same stop and everything. So I think we need to make everybody aware that, that there is going to, if they're concerned about, kids walking past each other, that's going to be an opportunity.
Excellent point. So we can
Melanie,
we can minimize the risk, but we can't eliminate it. Danny, go ahead.
is there another, I don't know if you have another slide that's transportation but is more focused on like the kids not taking the bus? One of the things that was brought up, which I agree with at my building leadership team, is are we going to get information out to parents? Because often at the elementary, I know, especially when it's nicer out, there's kids sitting outside at like 7:15, and that's what we're going to try to avoid, is having kids congregating in the same place. So yes, the bus transportation is a huge deal, but also the way that we're going to do things a little differently with not asking parents not to walk kids all the way down to the classroom and to drop kids off at the door, that kind of thing. I think that's going to be super important for the kids that are being dropped off at the elementary.
Excellent point. I did not have a slide for that, and I will add one.
Would you consider temperature screening before they get on a bus or before they're allowed to enter the school?
Legally, legal counsel and liability company have recommended not. And the reason is, if we miss even one person, there's liability. We do own 7 of the touchless thermometers. 3 are coming free from the state and 4 that we had previously purchased, which probably isn't enough to cover everyone. I don't know, from Jed or Dr. Geddards, what is your thought on how important? I know when I went to the hospital, before I could enter, my temperature was taken, the questions were asked, and if I wasn't already wearing a mask, which I was, you were given one.
I don't, as far as the busing too, I was wondering if there's a way that we could put hand sanitizer at the door of the bus that everybody has to take a squirt before they get on the bus. And I don't know, I know it came up before about requiring them to wear a mask on the bus. You know, when they get to school, it's optional to not wear it. Would be one thing. The temperature is, we were taking temperatures, but a lot of times people were taking it at home. And like I said, it was the questionnaire. You have a fever and you're assuming that the parents will take a temperature before they get there. You know, and I don't know if there's a badge that we could have that, you know, flips that they've been checked off or not checked off, especially the smaller ones. If, you know, some type of, well, it would be a sticker or something that, you know, that they get tagged that, you know what, they've been cleared to get into school or not. I guess you'd be more to push all these things as you start to have positive cases showing up in your community. You know, then you do more of the screening. I guess that's when I would try to do temperatures on everybody. If it started to be a pocket in the Manawa Air School District, or because we're in a high risk area. Jed and I talked a little bit about it because of all the vacationers that come up from outside of the state that have properties and cottages and come up here like this past holiday weekend. And we're going to probably see a trend where it's going up from people that were in the service industry that may have, you know, contacted these people or gotten in contact with them. Does that mean we're at risk here? I'm not sure. But like at our clinic, we have not had a lot of positives, but we're also right on the border between here and Outagamie. So every area is a little bit different. The screening will be hard. I guess we'll have to fluctuate every, you know, as we get into it and say, maybe we should require this. We start to see kids that are coming from home, you know, that aren't on the bus. And those kids tend to be, you know, more symptomatic. Then we may have to test those or test all the bus kids because they're more symptomatic. You know, try to locate an area and try to prevent it at that point. And I don't know what Jed's feelings are, but.
Yeah, I think similar. I think like, you know, you have to be able to do things logistically too. I mean, if you're screening everybody coming in, that's going to logistically could be pretty difficult. But like, I think like Dr. Getter said, if we start seeing a pocket that, you know, in the Manawa area that starts raising our level of concern, then I think we may need to adjust. And I think maybe like you mentioned too, like especially the little ones that maybe not be able to communicate if they're feeling a little bit off. That might be considerations there. You know, maybe we can catch some of the younger kids that aren't able to communicate or know that they're not particularly feeling well or communicate that they're feeling well. So it might, like a lot of things, we're probably going to have to adjust and modify things as we go. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to put some things in place, you know, universally and system wide. Sometimes you have to be able to adjust and
maybe in the registration packet, if we had a questionnaire, you know, that went home with the parent and it gives them 6 things to check before they send their child to school. And if you have, you know, 2 out of the 6, don't send your child in, please. And,
yep, and we're actually working on that to provide to all the school districts too, just a uniform questionnaire that people can take home and utilize.
Put it on their refrigerator and they check it off every day. And
yep.
The other thing I was going to have with the younger ones too is to start practicing washing their hands at school or at home. Try to get them to wash 3-4 times a day so they get used to washing. And some will wear a mask, some won't. But, you know, to practice wearing a mask, it's never too late to learn.
One thing that I have to add about screening the kids, if we would do it before they get on the bus, we have to stop traffic in order for the kids to get on the bus. That's one thing that I look at, is the safety factor with it. So if we have to stop to let the kid on the bus and then screen them, we already are stopping 30 seconds at least. That's, yeah, it's not a lot of time, but that is for a car waiting behind you. And another thing is, if they do have a temperature, we can't let them on the bus, so we have to send them home, not knowing if someone's home to watch the kid. That's what I'm looking at.
So ideally, as Dr. Gidders pointed out, if we could get from the county that questionnaire, we get that sent in a Skylar to all our families. We can hand it out at registration. We can do a lot of parent education on that. And ideally, we'd want them to stay home if they're feeling under the weather in any regard. We don't want them to take a gamble and come to school and then find out that they really didn't feel well. So that really needs to be part of our parent education program. We'll get to practice that during summer school. I think we're going to want to get those materials out sooner rather than later, so we can practice with that smaller group of students and spread the word, which for us starts on August 3rd.
A quick question on, screening and, telling the kids, and the parents, you really shouldn't come to school. What's going to be the policy to let them back in? Because, if their tummy feels a little queasy today and everything else, so they stay home, but they feel fine the next day, they don't have a temperature the next day, what's going to be the process to let them back in? I mean, most parents aren't going to be able to just drop everything and go get a doctor's excuse to be able to let the kid back into school at the drop of a hat. Most doctors' offices don't work that way. So I guess there needs to be a clear understanding of what the process is. Your child was this. In order to get back into school, what's got to happen? And what type of documentation are you going to need? It had been in the past, if a long time ago when my sons were in school, if I walked them into the office and said, hey, they're late today because they were at the doctor's office, everybody in school was fine with that because I walked them in there and everything. And nowadays, if the parent walks them in and says, hey, they were at the dentist this morning, they're excused, everybody wants a note from the dentist. You don't believe the parent that they were there. So we have to set some clear understanding of what, if this happens, these are the steps that need to be taken in order for things to come back online. And it has to be for everybody, and it has to be all the time.
We don't have that, and I will put that to, we have had some conversation on that a doctor can clear their patient at any time to return to school. So, I mean, that's an automatic. Otherwise, there are some guidelines from DHS and the CDC on if you have COVID-like symptoms, how long you should stay home. So I do believe our school nurses are going to be much more engaged with families and following up, or the health paraprofessionals in the offices following up with families and letting them know their return date, or if a doctor clears them as, it could have been COVID, but it's definitely not COVID, that kind of thing. Jed, it looks like you had something to share.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because, if you have COVID symptoms, potentially they could be other things. So if you got tested, I think that might answer some questions. If the family doctor provides, some information that it's being clear to come back, I think that's one piece. Otherwise, if you have symptoms, you could consider to actually be considered, potential or probable, and And right now, the guidelines are 10 days from symptom onset, plus 3 days of symptom improvement, including reduced fever without medication. So a minimum of 10 days if an individual has symptoms and hasn't been tested or hasn't been cleared by a physician.
So somebody has symptoms, potentially. They decide to stay home for the 10 days. They don't go to the doctor. Are you going to let them back in?
Right. If they've made it through the 10 days.
Right. So I guess those are the things that have to be spelled out, because I know for a fact that there are a couple of parents that are going to be like, I'm not running my kid to the doctor every time I turn around. Can't afford it. Don't have time to do it. They're sick. They've been sick before and everything. I'm not going over the top. They'll get, and their only way they're taking them to the doctor is, again, if, they feel that there's hospitalization needed and stuff. So you need to really be upfront and very clear about the steps and the triggers and the gates that have to be followed.
I don't mean to sound unsympathetic, but I agree with you we have to set the standard for everybody. And I know we're in a lower income, bracket, and you're going to have people, this one didn't because their mom couldn't come get them, or their dad or their grandma or their aunt or uncle. I think we have to start out from the beginning with the rules and stick with them and enforce them no matter what the situation. Otherwise, they're only as good as they're enforced.
I'm going to jump in here a little bit just because I know that every year there is an issue with our certain medical, not even medical, like head lice and temperature, and they have to stay home for 24 hours and whatnot. I don't foresee it being a perfect system, no matter how specific we are with our expectations as a school district. I can't expect the bus drivers to know who shouldn't get on the bus because they had a fever the day before. We inevitably get kids coming back to school. As the school district staff, we have to know what to do about it then and just be prepared, because I can't judge a parent for not remembering or whatever reason they have for sending their child to school because they can't take another day off or whatnot. So yes, we have to be specific, but we also have to be prepared for those students that are going to come, and we need to know what to do about it.
I'll see if we can also have Nurse Jackie speak a little bit more to that on what our health visit's going to look like, the isolation room, so we can get a slide and spell out more of that information. I definitely need to get the information, as Jed was sharing, about the 10 days plus 3 and those details and get that on a slide as well.
Dr. Getters, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's only a screening tool. So if you're positive for 3 or 4 items on there and they have to stay home that day, what we've had them do is call our nurse at the clinic, and then she reviews their symptoms, because you can have a runny nose that causes your cough, that causes you a loss of smell, with or without a fever if you have a sinus, involvement with it. And she'll usually screen through that and ask additional questions. And if she has questions, then she directs it to me. But I don't know if our nurse will be able to handle the volume initially or not, or, we'll have to work it out. But I think the first thing is it's a tool that you're going to have to do all these questions, and then from there decide, is it someone that can come back the next day that it was just a sinus or was an ear infection of some sort, or a sinus problem or allergies, causing their cough. So we'll have to have a system that's built in that will review a person that's been out. So they might not need the doctor slip all the time, to come back. But if the nurse clears them and says, it's clear for you to come back because it sounds like it's just your allergies, knowing that child and knowing that they've got an allergy problem in the spring or the fall, and that they're going to be congested all the time. And did you take your medications? and things of that sort. So I think your nurse is going to play a big part in that, in your screenings and getting kids back sooner. And then, as Jed said, and if they test enough or meet enough criteria, then send them to get the swab done, the testing, further testing done.
So this is where an additional slide would need to be added in the safe and orderly environment section. So really, the health visit protocol, the isolation room probably needs its own separate slide just to break that out and be more clear. So I took a lot of notes about what we were just talking about, and we can get that fixed up for next week. Learning looks a little vague here. I'm just kidding. Bryant has put together a very extensive technology plan, which he alluded to this evening verbally, but it's many pages long, documenting in great detail the process that he's going through, and then training and purchasing all of those components. So I'll probably just have Bryant insert the relevant points for the technology plan on this page.
I want to make sure the teachers have access to speak about it before we share with people publicly, if that's okay.
Yeah. So we have about a week.
Yeah.
Time is not on our side. I don't know where this summer has gone. And then more specifically in learning, and the principals will fill this in, just as an example, I started typing this in, but Dan and Danny will each have slides for their school that at a high level describe what the learning program will be like as we expect it to come back in the fall, which right now is that middle column, that moderate to high risk, which is people are in cohorts and pretty much stay with their classmates and teacher throughout the day. The other teachers come to them, that sort of thing. So that'll look a little bit different at the secondary, but I put in a slide for each one of the schools. And so we'll have those filled out for next time. Then I will also add the details, a few high-level statistics from our surveys. I hope to have the staff survey, if things go well, tomorrow or Wednesday, have that out to staff and have results back for next week, just to ask some questions there about comfort levels and professional development and things of that sort, and then put those high-level statistics on a slide or two. And then someone inquired today, did I have a slide for sports? And I did start one. Right now, as far as I know, we're going into the fall sports season, again, using the risk levels from that statewide assessment. So that would be the Wisconsin dashboard. So right now we're in the high risk. So we would go to the sports specific information that was put out by the WIAA. They say what you're supposed to do if you're in the high risk category, and the coaches would follow that. So the coaches have already been reviewing that here in the district. And then the challenge will be whether or not the contest will be held, because we do cross county lines. So we're going to have to be, I'm thinking the athletic director is going to be doing a lot of consulting with the other district to find out what county they're located in, what risk level are they, and do we have enough players to actually play the game, that we don't have illness that has caused us to need to forfeit, that sort of thing. But that's currently what we're thinking at a real high level there in terms of sports. There was some talk about flipping fall and spring sports seasons. But I don't think that got a lot of traction at the WIAA level. And the reason they thought of that is a lot of the spring sports, such as track, are more individualized and people are just naturally more spaced. But that didn't seem to get traction. And then this is the slide Jed reminded me we should put in that things can change. So I thought I'd end with that so that people know that we may have to adjust on the fly. Any other thoughts or reactions?
I really think we need to flesh out what the bus schedule is going to look like. Like I said, my grandkids are normally getting on the bus between 6:30 and 6:40 in the morning. One of the first ones on, and then they're also one of the first ones off. Last ones off, I should say, and everything. So I think we really need a clear understanding of, what that busing schedule is going to look like, and everything. Because I know that there's, just on my road, there's, quite a variety of age groups for kids along just Highway K. And so it would be very beneficial to really understand how that bus schedule is going to work, and what timing differences that there might be, especially for those that are saying, hey, I used to, the bus picked him up at 6:45. I leave for work at 7 o'clock. Well, the new bus schedule may be something vastly different. So how do I still leave for work and get those kids on the bus the way I used to?
I believe there's a registration form for transportation in the mailing that went out, and school registration day is, somebody help me, is it August 5th? 4th. Okay, I was pretty close.
The second day of summer school.
Okay, perfect. So is that soon enough? So Jacob shortly thereafter would get the information then, probably about the 4th or 5th of August. And how much turnaround time do you need to put routes together and get information out to families?
Yeah, so like last year, there was a postcard that went out to all the families, given their bus number and the pickup and drop off times. So that would I'd need a week for that. And to put the routes together, I'd probably need 2 weeks. So it'd be right around the 1st of September is when families should know when they'll be getting picked up and dropped off. And unfortunately, Sandra, for the Ogdensburg, those are our 2 longest routes, and there's not a whole lot we can do with that given the amount of country we have to cover within an hour and a half time period. There's not much I can say, unfortunately, but we try our best to get everyone on at a fair time, but that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, I understand the challenges and everything else. It's just that if there's a big shift in time and everything for those that are, heading to work or making arrangements for, somebody just to make sure the kids get on the bus okay, and that type of thing, giving them only a day or two advance notice is going to be kind of a hit, so we need to at least be able to give them a heads up per se, to just say, the times may change based on what we have to do, so that they can at least be looking at what their options might be.
Yep. Carmen, are you still on? Or maybe Dr. Opper, can you answer? Were the registrations packets sent out to the families? I'm not sure.
I believe they went out in the mail.
I believe, this is Danny, I think that they don't go out till the 11th. And
Okay.
that's what secretaries have been taking their vacations. So I believe they go out July 11th, but I could
Okay.
be.
Once you do receive those, send them in right away, or just bring them to the school, or even just give the bus garage a call. I don't know if you guys have the number accessible. Otherwise, I'll put it in the comments too. Just give us a call and tell us whether or not your student will need busing or not. And I can try to give a very estimated time based on what last year looked like. But like you said, it's all going to change. And until I know for sure what families will transport themselves and who will need bus transportation, it's going to be hard to decipher the times. But I'll put our number in the comments, and I'll put my email as well if you have any more questions too.
And I know this, this will be answered on the cards, but, I guess I'm also looking at, those kids that are in sports that aren't driving and everything, they're going to be on the bus in the morning, but they wouldn't necessarily be on the bus in the evening, for a period of sports time and everything. So I guess that will play into some of the other planning opportunities that, quote unquote, you're going to have.
I guess another concern, not busing, sorry, would be if all the teachers are making sure all the teachers are on the same page. So nobody is like, oh, we're going down the hallway the wrong way, or, to make sure that all the teachers are in collaboration and know exactly what the plan should be so that they can follow it. So there's no misunderstanding, I guess, is one of my concerns that will happen.
Hey, Stephanie, just so that you know, Dan and I both we decided this before school ended, that we are continuing to have staff meetings once a month over the summer. They are voluntary, like if a teacher can't because they're on vacation or something, and then all the materials will be available to them if they weren't able to be there. So my last meeting in June, the majority of the staff was part of it. So that's one of the ways that we're working with staff and kind of updating them and letting them know what's going on, other than our building leadership teams that are meeting also during the summer. And then we also, like my building leadership team, we discussed some of the things that we're going to be doing during our in-service days. We have 2 building in-service days in September where we are going to go through and make sure that teachers know exactly what's happening, and sometimes even down to the verbiage that all of the teachers will be using with all of the students, so everybody is on the same page.
Dan, did you want to chime in with anything else from the secondary level? Thank you, Dan.
I think you summarized it very well. I've got a staff meeting coming up in another week, and we are going to be disseminating a lot of information, expectations, and we'll call additional meetings as necessary so that way our staff feel as though they're in the loop and they are prepared for being able to have those conversations.
Anything else that we should add to the list? I've made quite a few notes, and it looks like I need to add some slides and add some details, and I've got good information. I'm wondering if we should meet again next Monday night and see if we can get this into our polished state and that we've really answered questions. Again, encouraging you to take the draft of this information, what you're hearing, the way you're internalizing this information and sharing it with family, friends, neighbors, and get reactions so that we make sure we cover all our bases. Is there anything that we're not talking about that our families are thinking about and they just haven't told us yet? I'd rather overplan now and be totally ready and have something to pull out and implement than to start the school year and find that we're scrambling because there's something we forgot to do. Is next Monday at 6 o'clock a good time for folks to get together again? I'm just double checking my calendar too. Looking good. Okay. All right. I will send invites out again, and if I get any new updated information from any sources, I will share that with you as well. If you hear any critical information that you think our group should know about and think about before we get together next week, don't hesitate to give me a quick email or text, call, and I can take note of that and relay information to the group. And again, I thank all of you for being a part of this. I know it's a huge amount of time on your summer vacation when you could be out enjoying a beautiful evening. I withdraw that, a semi-stormy evening. But be safe, and I will see you all again next week then. Thank you very much.